Welcome to Live and Work More Human. And today you are with your co-hosts, me, Sally, and Alexis. And we are talking about, well, what are we talking about, Lex? What are we unpacking today?
Before we dive into the full episode, here's a quick message from our podcast partners. AI sped things up, but it also made work harder to see. There's an invisible workload, hidden friction, and capability gaps that don't show up until it's too late. And when you can't see it, you can't manage or fix it.
Humanico gives you a live, organisation-wide view of how work is actually happening, connecting skills, strengths, and real team dynamics in one place. So you can spot risk earlier, unlock performance faster, and make decisions that actually hold up in the real world.
Humanico. Clarity that drives performance. Visit www.humanico.co, that's humanico.co/live and work more human. I guess we're really, in a nutshell, talking about the cost of digital distraction. And for leaders in this space right now, the sort of paradox that they're navigating around these technologies and how we've brought them in to make us more efficient, but whether or not they're actually doing that.
It's a really good question because I think there is this sort of pervasive narrative of everything digital, every new piece of software is just this kind of extra step in making things go faster, bigger, better, stronger. Is that the case? Like, can you tell us a little bit more about this core paradox that you're talking about?
Yeah, and that's it. I think it is a paradox that we face, that we're trying to leverage technology that is being sold to us as increasing effectiveness while also somehow trying to protect the people, the health and the well-being of employees whose effectiveness depends on this technology. And in many ways, I think applications or technology we're using is actually creating more inefficiencies and more things for us to manage. So there's a lot here for leaders to navigate. And I understand, especially with the very fast integration of AI into workplaces, how a lot of people are struggling to sort of see the forest for the trees in this conversation.
And I wonder if there's also like, because a lot of leaders, obviously there's a lot of pressure from the top down, particularly to be integrating AI and using this software more and more. Do you think leaders are kind of shying away a little bit from the conversation of what impact having for their people?
Yeah, I think we are seeing like this really quick pendulum swing. I think a few years ago, we were just sold the narrative that if you're not on board with AI, you're going to be left behind. But I think AI as a term has sort of become used to describe anything, anything from applications that use AI integrations to LLMs and things like ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity. So using it to do thinking for us, to other automation tools. So I think in a lot of ways, again, leaders just don't understand where AI should be used and how. And I think as a result of that, we're kind of seeing the pendulum swing back the other way now, and people are kind of almost going anti-AI in some of the workplaces that I certainly consult with as well. So it's an interesting time.
I love this kind of pushback against it and almost sort of putting onus back on the leaders to say why we're using it, what's the impact, like sell it to me
Yeah.
rather than just expect me to integrate it seamlessly into my workflow.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's it, right? I think it's been sold to us as an inevitability. We felt like there's been no choice in AI use. It's be on board or be left behind. But I think what we're seeing now is more intentional, conscious slowing down of, okay, but what are the benefits? How, what, when, where, why should we be using AI? And also taking some agency over the fact that it also isn't an inevitability and doesn't need to be, depending on our organization and the types of work we're doing as well.
I feel like part of it is just missing this intentionality. Is that,
Yes,
yeah, to say more.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I think specifically looking at different industries as well, the ways that we're using AI in certain ways, specifically in creative fields, for example, we're using it to replace the creative work that needs to be done rather than the autonomous work that humans don't need to do. So I think there's some, again, intentionality in that piece as well to really look at where AI might help us. But certainly, I think digital distraction, generally, AI is one piece of the puzzle, but I think there's a lot more to this that leaders and even as individuals, we need to be thinking about as well.
So what is it beyond AI that you see as being sort of really big causes of digital distraction?
I think it's general technology use. I think our screen time's increased. I think everything from emails through to social media is playing an impact on how we experience not just work, but ourselves and the world around us. And I think, as a millennial, I will say from my personal experience, I've grown up with things like social media applications on my phone. And so, what is the cost of that digital distraction? And how does my experience of work change compared to that of, say, a Gen Z or someone older than me? So, I think there's myriad ways in which technology, whether it's phone based or computer based or any kind of screen based, is implicating the way we work. And I think until now, we're sort of only seeing it, especially in the workplace, through the lens of productivity and what it means for efficiency and effectiveness. But I think the personal fallout and how that then flows uphill into our organizations is only just fully being understood now.
So fascinating. And you've identified some different sort of aspects of the cost that this has for organizations. We're going to delve into that in a sec. But there is something that sort of strikes me as is almost a similarity between how we've talked historically about burnout as well. Because we tend to have this focus, I think, naturally on the individual, because it is ultimately it's the individual who's experiencing stress when we're talking about burnout. It's the individual who's using their device and engaging with their social media, and that has that sort of flow up effect. Now, what is this really is it an individual issue, or should we be framing it as a cultural one?
I think it's both, Sally. And interestingly, to your burnout sort of connection there as well, like I think this happening at a societal, organization, and individual level, I think many of these things, and we'll focus on social media right now as an example, is something we use at an individual level, but it impacts everything from our creativity to our emotional mental health through to our relationships. And there's no way that as a human being, we can't compartmentalize that from how it then implicates us in the workplace. So I think in the last 5 to 10 years, certainly it feels like since COVID, I have felt like this exponential quickening of the pace of just modern life. And I think technology has so much to answer for in that. And I think as a result of that, we're all feeling this almost like permanent franticness. And the more we're on our devices, the more that feeling becomes exacerbated. And it feels like the momentum is like a speeding train right now for many of us.
Definitely. And I think there's also a lot of self-blame that goes on for people, because I think because it's us interfacing with our phone, and we read all kinds of articles about how, just don't. But there's so many powerful ways that we are pushed.
Helpful.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
super great.
Just
Excellent.
get off your phone.
Would never
Easy.
have thought of that myself. Wild. So, I think it's really important for us to acknowledge just how, compelling and pervasive and yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but how strongly, tooled these things are to actually capture us, to actually be moving us in this direction.
100%. And there's a lot in that, right? We know now that the hijacking of our attention through things like social media is very much baked into the design of these applications. They're designed for engagement. Why? Because engagement drives things like ad revenue, drives longer time people spend on applications. And as a result of that, we become the product of these applications. They do this through things like infinite scroll features and hijacking and exploiting our most basic psychological mechanisms, like our need for reward. So this point isn't really breaking news to us, but it still kind of feels a little disempowering as an individual. So it's not always helpful to just say, get off your phone because we know it's hijacking your attention. I think there's a twofold response we need to take to this problem. I think half of it's individual, and that's obviously the part that's in our control. The other half is, whether it's those of us in this space advocating for this at a systems level, at a governance level, is absolutely critical to pushing the change as well. And as we spoke about in our conversations around burnout, Sally, it's the same with workplace sort of governance and legislation as well. There has to be that level of protection in place for individuals as well. And I think that's certainly the case when it comes to technology use and social media use.
I love the alignment in this kind of like multi-pronged and kind of approach that we can have to these kind of issues, because I think it does mean it also really empowers us as individuals, I think, to sort of make sure that we're looking after our well-being in the burnout context, so that we can fight these fights and ensure that the regulation and legislation, but also protocols and policies at an organizational level are being put in place too.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
And so, in terms of the costs that you've identified, and let's just sort of talk about the organizational context. So, we've got
Yeah.
four sort of scopes of cost: creativity, emotional, productivity, and relational. Like, my natural tendency is to go, tell me all about the relational. Um, can we maybe just double click on one of those that you
Yeah.
think is really perhaps underestimated by leaders?
I think the one that most leaders will jump most quickly to is the productivity cost, because a lot of a leader's remit is to save resources, so time, energy, expenditure. But I would argue that that's actually not the most important cost. I think the thing that we stand to lose most importantly is the creativity of our employees, because when we have things like fragmented attention, and some of the research that I looked at showed that we're being interrupted something like 63 to 64 times a day. And that includes everything from email pings to buzzers on our phone to self interrupting. We're actually as our attention declines, we interrupt ourselves more by checking even when we haven't had a ping, because we're conditioning and rewiring our behavior to do that. As a result of that fragmented attention, we're never reaching those levels of deep, complex thought where we can truly solve problems, where we can truly tap into creativity, where we can create white space for unstructured wandering and those sorts of things as well. So I think a lot of leaders tend to focus on efficiency. We need to create efficiency so people have more time, but time to do what? Because oftentimes that's not really renewed in a way that adds value. And I think one of the things we need to focus on is stripping back digital distraction so that we have time and space for creativity, not under duress. And I make that very clear, because oftentimes it's like, this is the dedicated 1 hour creativity time. But anyone who knows, who's walked into a room and has been told something like, okay, we're going to get together in a huddle and we're going to brainstorm or try and create this innovative or creative outcome, and there's that time pressure, there's that duress, it's almost impossible to perform.
It really is. I think that's such an important, we need to be not making sure that we're also sort of just compressing that, I think, as well. And what you spoke to, I had a session with leaders a couple of weeks ago, and I remember dropping, I think it's a stat that Cal Newport uses around how long it takes us to refine that level of deep
Yeah. It's
concentration
like
after.
23 and a half minutes. Yeah, it's
Exactly. And
nuts.
I saw on faces as mentioned that statistic, that people are like doing the calibration of in their head of like, there's not even enough minutes in the day for the amount of distractions that I have for me to ever get back to a state of deep work.
So effectively, we're in this permanent state of never getting below the surface level thinking, right?
Absolutely. And I'm sure we're seeing that, we're experiencing that, we're living that, but we're also seeing it in our organizations and perhaps in reduced levels of creativity and relational, optimization of outcomes, that like in interpersonal relations as well.
Totally. Well, and like if we do want to jump to the productivity outcomes, like if you think about the kind of work you do when you feel permanently distracted, it's the low bar, easy work. You're probably stuck in your email inbox all day because that is the easy, if I clear this, then I create the time and the space for the deep work, for the creative work, for the relationships. So we tend to perpetuate it ourselves by then feeling time poor, feeling anxious about how we manage all the things, and then prioritizing the easy low bar things that help us feel like we're actually being productive, but actually don't do the deep work.
And I think at that level, and I haven't thought about this before, I hope this is going to make sense. It's like, so we've got this kind of like superficial interaction with things, and then we perhaps use AI to write an email or a piece of research that we probably should do ourselves so that we go through that cognitive process, but we don't. So then our entire workday is just either, low level sort of quick emails or AI doing that deeper level thinking. So we're actually avoiding that cognitive process altogether.
Almost permanently. And if you think about the memory recall, like, or the opportunity lost when we're not doing the thinking ourselves, if we're not actually doing the thinking, we're not creating a memory, we're not creating the deep thought required for that. So oftentimes, and I have been prey to this in the past, you'll get an email response from someone. You're like, what is that about? I don't even remember sending that. Oh, because you used Outlook or whoever to write the email for you, because the metric at that point in time was an empty inbox, but not actually thoughtful and or helpful responses in any way. And so when we conflate things like visibility and efficiency with value, that's when we find ourselves in this permanent pseudo productivity trap of doing low bar crap work, frankly, to clear the decks, to do the deep work we never actually get to.
Whew. Yeah, mic
Yeah.
drop.
Yeah, it's so, but how often are we stuck in that trap? All of us, though, I know this and I still do it.
Absolutely. And I think there's also this kind of, again, this sort of, this sense of like, I'm aware of it, but I'm still picking up my phone when I haven't even had a notification, or I'm still dropping something into AI, copy pasting it into the email because it's just easier. How do we, and particularly perhaps for the leaders who are listening now, listening to this thinking, "Well, what can I do in my team to be shifting this to a place where, I'm perhaps minimizing digital distractions, allowing people to work in a way that does allow them to be creative and be productive and connect with others, have these great experiences at work." What does that look like, Lex?
I think we need to start considering technology to be integrated with the culture of organizations. I often think we talk about culture in organizations as being something that people do, but when people are on screens and on technology all of the time, how we use technology becomes the culture of our organization. It is integrated with how we behave, and therefore, how we behave becomes the culture. So I think we need to very intentionally and consciously consider the role that we want technology, whether it's devices, applications, artificial intelligence, to play in the culture of our organization. And knowing the role expectations of your team intimately helps you to uncover this. Because if you need a team to solve complex, challenging issues, if you need a team to be relationally very cohesive and bonded, which let's face it, whose team shouldn't actually be in that environment, right? Then we need to understand in the ways technology will prohibit this and the ways where it could actually benefit us. And I think a lot of the time, rolling back some of the reliance on technology and some of the unnecessary technology integrations, whether it's, and I know, for example, like in our work, Sally, we use things like Trello and email. We have a few different ways that we create markers of workflows, auditing some of those sorts of things. Like, in what ways is technology adding to that? In other ways, where is it creating friction that could be reduced so that people have time and space for more of the relational things, for more of the creativity and stuff like that. So I think we need to see what our relationship with technology looks like at a cultural level and start to really reframe culture from the ground up and use technology to orbit around that rather than be the central part of that culture.
Amazing. So I can imagine there's also some behaviors that leaders can be exhibiting in their team environment as well that'll be really helpful in terms of building that culture. What might that look like in a day to day?
I think one of the most crucial things that leaders can do, and it comes down to the relational costs of digital distraction. I think first and foremost, one of the greatest things leaders can do is actually model presence in their interpersonal reactions with their team. And I mean, both in meetings, in one to ones. We don't want to be fubbing people. That is, using your phone to snub the person in front of you, or being, again, over indexed in our technology when we should be focused on the team or the person in front of us. So I think that leaders who model presence and sort of unmitigated attention in this current environment will be the ones whose people genuinely feel the ability to put devices and technology down because it's being modeled to them. They're also feeling what that attention and what that presence is like to receive as well.
And I guess it's giving them an experience of feeling seen and heard and valued, because that's exactly what our attention and our presence does, isn't it? I led a session on active listening yesterday, and we were talking about this. Like, how do we disrupt things when we just glance at our phone or even just, look down and we think it's innocuous? It can completely derail trust and respect in that situation. And there's a real opportunity for leaders, I think, to be quite sort of vigilant with themselves about how they're interacting with technology in front of people.
Agreed. And not to go down sort of the full neuroscience rabbit hole of this, but things like your body language, your eye contact, and the sustained presence in a relationship as well, as you've said, just demonstrates to the person in front of us that we see them, we hear them, we value them, what they have to say is of interest to us. There's nothing worse when you're trying to speak to someone and they swivel their chair back to continue with emails at the same time, or they pick their phone up. Like, it makes us feel like we've been dismissed. It makes us feel that what we have to say is second rate to whatever's on their screen. So I think, just as a baseline leadership behavior, attention and presence is sadly the greatest gift almost that we can give right now, I think.
I think it's a huge one as well, but it's one of those things where I think in so many ways, whether it's our wellness, our health, our fitness, we're trying to find the magic pill and optimize and sort of outsource all of these things, when really so often it comes down to being present, being human, and showing up. And I think often it's also, if we do have something going on in our lives where we do need to be perhaps checking the phone, I don't know, like wife's about to have a baby, whatever, then
Totally.
but say that. Say, "This is why I'm just checking my phone because I'm
Yeah,
expecting a call from whatever." Giving
totally.
people that information is really important too, not just assuming that they're gonna know that what you're looking at is actually important.
Absolutely, and I think it kind of it feeds into this as well, but also, like, redefining what responsiveness looks like in your team. Modeling to people that home life, family life, taking care of your family, taking care of your children, having interests outside of work, analog interests, hopefully, is really important, and that there's not an expectation for devices to be integrated in every element of our lives.
Mm.
I was reading staggering data last week that spoke, I think, specifically around Gen Z, but they were saying there's in a lot of Gen Z households right now, there's 45% of people on their phone during dinner conversations. Like
Ouch.
half of the Western world are using a phone at the dinner table.
Yeah.
That feels really disappointing to me because when I grew up, that was the one time when our entire family could gather together for a shared meal. We could reflect on what had happened that day. There was obviously lots of arguments in my household as well, but it was a shared, yeah,
Why do you
it
think
was
I
a
became a
shared,
lawyer?
right, a shared family moment. So I think when leaders are also demonstrating that, hey, after 5 p.m., it's phones down, or hey, in this specific meeting, when we're coming together to discuss this specific thing, it's a phone down, it's a laptops away moment. I think we have to redefine those moments of responsiveness and be okay with not being available all the time, and both model that but also have that expectation for our team as well.
Absolutely. I've worked with a team not too long ago where the leader started to bring like this like wicker basket that they brought from home into team meetings and had everyone pop their phone into the wicker basket and then like leave it by the door. And they also had an upfront conversation with the team about how uncomfortable are we feeling right now that the phones are over there and maybe pinging away. And it was a real shift. I think also really important to acknowledge the discomfort that they were all experiencing because it is weird for us when it feels like an extension of who we are to be without it for an hour or so.
Definitely. And Sally, you and I have done a lot of this work together with organizations as well. And I think it's something that's important to talk about. But I don't think a lot of organizations slow down to talk about their operating principles as well and how that impacts culture. And this is something that we've done a lot of work at Human Leaders, is helping teams reestablish from scratch. Like, when are the times we're going to use technology? What are the, how do we want to walk, talk, look, and treat each other as a team? And I think technology, again, kind of feels like it's just like an aside to all of that. We've always treated that as something that it's a tool that we utilize, but it is so integrated in everything now that I think we need to set really clear norms and operating principles around communication behaviors, digital tools, why we're using them, when and how, what asynchronous work looks like, and having those clear expectations, because that also helps people to feel less anxious about responsiveness and availability as well.
An immediate flow on effect to burnout prevention right there as well.
Right? Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
I feel like I mean, your upcoming book, Real, is going to unpack so much of this, but also the sort of the broader story of attention and identity. Now, we could definitely talk about this for literally days. Is there, just to sort of round out, like, is there something that you see as sort of a mirror, perhaps, what we're seeing in organizations as being a mirror of a broader sort of shift happening in society around attention and identity and technology at this juncture?
Absolutely. I think we are very much becoming who we are on our devices. I think we are so embedded in how we use things like social media and technology now that it's becoming really challenging for us to separate the self from the self that we experience on the device. And so, what I write about in my book, Real, but also what I think I'm seeing in organizations and at an individual level as well, is this enmeshment between our online identity and our real identity. And I think the more that we tend towards that, the more we're at the mercy of the influence that we're continuously experiencing through those devices and things like social media. So for me, the last few years, and certainly through writing the book, has been a bit of a juncture moment to kind of hit pause and step back and say, who am I becoming if these digital habits continue in this direction? What would that mean for my identity and who I become and my relationships? And that's something that I think we need to give a little more thought to, not just how is this fragmenting my attention, but who am I as a result of that permanently distracted, fragmented attention, and whether or not that's the trajectory we want to spend our lives in.
I think it's an incredibly powerful reflection, Lex, that kind of, if I continue on this, if this is who who I keep being, because what we do is who we are, what will that mean for the person that I am in 6, 12 months, but also years from now? I think it's a really powerful one. And almost working back from there, we can start to perhaps identify some behaviors that we do want to shift in our day-to-day use of screens and digital technology. Now, it's been an amazing chat. Can you let everyone know where they can find more about, obviously, the book, but also about this particular article that you've written?
Yeah, absolutely. So this article I wrote alongside Professor Martin Gutmann and Scott Allen. It will be at the link in our show notes. It's called The Digital Leaders Paradox, and it talks about the 4 costs of digital distraction. And as leaders, it gives you a bit of a blueprint around what you can do about that. So all of those details are in the show notes, as well as my new book, Real, which is out on the 30th September 2026, which is a wild sentence to
That
say out
is
loud.
wild and so exciting. I am so ready for the world to be able to read this. And I'm sure we're going to have some very spicy conversations off the back of some of the topics that you explore in the book. And I have to use, for some reason, I'm like, just keep thinking about Jude Bellingham because we had a conversation about him just before we started recording. Perhaps we can
on
use
the topic of algorithms.
Case studies. Exactly. We may just delve into that one.
Football specific.
I mean, I think it's been both about algorithms. It's been interesting, following each other on social media as well.
Yeah.
There's a bit of overlap there. And
it's an interesting thing to watch. Yeah, for sure.
Is. Awesome. Thank you so much, Lex. This has been such a fun conversation. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Live and Work More Human. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for being with us at Live and Work More Human. You can learn more in our show notes or visit liveandworkmorehuman.com. We'll see you next time.